When a student walks into a counselor's office in crisis at 1 p.m., there's a brief window of openness. The timeline starts right then. For most Georgia school administrators, the honest answer to how long it takes to get that student sitting with a licensed therapist is measured in weeks, not hours. Add in the approaching July 2026 deadline for HB 268 compliance, and administrators are facing compounding pressure to solve this logistical gridlock fast. Fixing this bottleneck requires a hard look at existing operational protocols. You cannot achieve same-day intervention by simply asking traditional counseling partnerships to work faster. By the time an appointment happens 14 days later, the family is usually back to managing alone. A weeks-long waitlist is a failure of intervention. This flowchart illustrates two distinct paths for mental health response. The top path tracks the traditional model, ending at day 14, while the bottom path tracks the MentalSpace school model, aiming for same-day care. Notice the friction on the top path. Paper intake forms stall on desks, insurance verification takes days, and local network availability is often non-existent. The teletherapy path bypasses those delays entirely. Intake happens during the very first session, and instant insurance verification clears the way for immediate care. Moving to this faster track requires administrators to abandon reliance on the traditional, face-to-face counselor structure. Getting a professional in front of a student on the same day means shifting to an external, digitally facilitated infrastructure. This graphic demonstrates the first rigorous test of any partnership: overall systemic capacity. We have one therapist mapped against 1,200 students. The traditional model relies on hiring a single, contracted local therapist to manage the needs of that entire building. For the select few students who get a slot on that single schedule, the outcome is positive. These lucky few receive excellent, highly localized intimacy. The trade-off is mathematical. One person can only see so many students a week, which creates a hard bottleneck, leaving the vast majority of the school entirely unserved. Localized intimacy is operationally useless if the math prevents the majority of your students from ever accessing it. The second evaluation metric is speed. When an acute crisis hits, the time it takes to intervene dictates the outcome. MentalSpace deploys a dedicated teletherapy infrastructure across the district, assigning specific therapist teams to specific schools. Deploying a dedicated digital team compresses the timeline from the initial request for help down to mere hours. But there is a real trade-off here. Administrators and families have to accept placing a digital screen between the student and the clinician. If you want to stabilize a crisis the moment it happens, replacing physical presence with a screen is the necessary operational price. The third test is cultural fit. Community representation dictates how effective the therapy will actually be. If a clinician does not reflect the demographic of the student body, they often lose the student's trust before the first session ends. Instead of relying on whoever is available locally, MentalSpace utilizes an external team of diverse, culturally competent clinicians. The concession for schools is giving up direct control over local hiring. You have to rely entirely on the partner organization's vetting process. Surrendering that hiring control is a strategic sacrifice required to guarantee you have a roster diverse enough to build immediate student trust. Beyond clinical capacity, there is a hidden barrier that halts rapid care: the friction of out-of-pocket costs and insurance verification. This chart compares high out-of-pocket costs against comprehensive insurance integration. Notice how the financial barrier drops to zero when Medicaid is accepted alongside providers like BCBS, Cigna, and Aetna. Integrating broad insurance acceptance completely eliminates financial friction for families across all socioeconomic lines district-wide. The trade-off is that achieving seamless billing requires tight administrative coordination between the school and the partner to maintain FERPA and HIPAA compliance. Removing financial barriers for families means shifting the heavy lifting from the parent's wallet directly into the school's administrative workflow. We need to look at the measurable institutional impacts of deploying rapid interventions. This visualization plots the specific outcomes of the teletherapy model: an 89% improvement in attendance alongside a 92% reduction in anxiety. Those positive data points come at a physical cost to the school's campus. To facilitate confidential sessions, schools are required to provide private spaces and guarantee robust internet infrastructure. Utilizing an external partnership still demands significant internal infrastructural commitments from the district. it is time to shift our perspective from viewing school therapy as a luxury local amenity to an operational crisis response system. If you are a high-resource private school with a large in-house clinical staff or a facility lacking reliable internet, this model isn't for you. Look at this readiness check. The ideal candidates are districts staring down compliance deadlines, managing high Medicaid populations, and currently suffering from extended wait times. This infrastructure is built specifically for principals dealing with acute crises that escalate needlessly during a 2-week waiting period. Solving the modern K-12 mental health bottleneck requires trading the familiarity of the waiting room for the speed